Ethiopia's Unquenchable Thirst. This video is intended for Department of State and Department of Defense personnel, particularly U.S. Africa Command planners, as well as key members of the international organizations who work in Africa to support humanitarian development. The African continent is poised for tremendous growth in the decades ahead. According to the Pardee Center's African Futures Project, the African continent's population will increase to comprise nearly 23% of the world's total population by 2050. Ethiopia is one of the faster growing countries in Africa. We will examine water scarcity and water security. Look at Ethiopia's current situation in terms of population, growth, economics, and water demand. See a causal loop diagram that displays the interaction between these key modules, population, economics, and water demand, and then use the Pardee Center's International Futures Model to see where these trends are heading in Ethiopia. It is possible that Ethiopia's future growth and water demands will lead to other concerns in the region. Water scarcity, a global issue. The United Nations identified access to water as a concern as far back as 1964. A 2015 United Nations white paper stated, an increasing number of regions will face growing water scarcity, and highlighted that global water supply is heavily influenced by factors such as population growth, urbanization, energy demand, and other factors. Trends we want to look for in any developing country of interest include how quickly its population is growing, whether the economy is growing sufficiently to improve the standard of living for those people, and urbanization rates. Let's look at Ethiopia's current state. Ethiopia is a rapidly growing country. With a population of 108 million people and an annualized GDP growth nearly 11%, Ethiopia seems poised for rapid growth in the coming decades. Ethiopia's birth rate of 4.9 children per woman indicates strongly that Ethiopia's population will grow significantly in the future. Additionally, the country's economic growth has outpaced population growth, enabling its per capita GDP to increase from $1,900 in 2015 to $2,200 in 2017, according to the CIA's World Factbook. We can see examples of this growth in Ethiopia from open press articles, such as this one from February 2018 on National Public Radio. According to the article, Ethiopia is nearing completion of a Nile River dam. Ethiopia relies on hydroelectric sources for approximately 80% of its electrical generation. Given Ethiopia's recent population and economic growth, it follows that the country would construct dams to meet growing energy demands. This article asserts that this would cause issues with Ethiopia's neighbors that also rely on the Nile River for their water supply. Now, we will look at the International Futures Model, or IFS model, to examine historical and future trends to see where Ethiopia has been since 1960 and where Ethiopia will head based on current trends to 2050. The IFS model, created by Dr. Barry Hughes in 1980, is today in its 7th generation. The IFS model pulls data from over 2,000 sources. This causal loop diagram illustrates the current state in Ethiopia. At the top is the population module. Population is influenced by two key variables, birth rate and deaths. Ethiopia's high birth rate reinforces the left loop and will lead to continued growth in Ethiopia's population in the coming decades. This population growth has a direct impact on Ethiopia's water demand. Other factors include economic factors such as population urbanization, electricity access, and per capita GDP. Two modules that have a strong impact on Ethiopia's water demand and usage include the infrastructure module and the economics module. This causal loop diagram shows that Ethiopia's growing population directly affects water demand. The top portion of the diagram is directly from Hughes' International Futures book. Ethiopia's growing population and increasing urban population is also driving GDP up at a sufficient rate that GDP per capita is also rising. This drives up water usage as well as other factors such as electricity demand, etc. The left ring on the CLD shows how rising population and increased urban population drives up demand for safe water. This drives up water demand, water total supply, especially in municipal areas, and has a reinforcing effect on increasing water demand. What does Ethiopia's future look like? In its current path, Ethiopia will experience significant population growth. Its population will increasingly move to urban areas, and its economic growth will lead to significant increases in development and per capita GDP. Ethiopia will require significant additional water supplies to enable these trends to continue. This chart, generated using the IFS model, shows Ethiopia's population growth. Since 1960, when its population was just below 25 million, Ethiopia has grown to around 108 million people today. With high birth rates leading to accelerating population growth, Ethiopia's population will nearly double to 203 million by 2050. These four population pyramids show how Ethiopia has a significant youth bulge due to its high birth rates. The top left pyramid shows a high number of young children against a very small aged population in 2015. As high birth rates continue, the pyramid begins to broaden in 2025 at the top right. Looking at the top left continuing in 2035 at the bottom right left, but even as those children of today become the adults and middle-aged population by 2050, Ethiopia will still remain a youthful population in 2050. Economically, Ethiopia has experienced a 10% GDP growth rate. This growth trend is projected to continue as Ethiopia develops and outside nations continue to invest in it. This growth will enable GDP per capita to also rise, translating to an improved standard of living for Ethiopia's people. Though mostly stagnant from 1960 through 2005, as this chart shows, Ethiopia's per capita GDP began to grow significantly in 2005. According to IFS model projections, Ethiopia's per capita GDP will continue to grow, nearly tripling to around $6,000 by 2050. GDP per capita increases drive increased water use. This bar chart gives a closer look on where Ethiopia's per capita GDP is projected to go from 2015 through 2050. Again, per capita GDP will nearly triple in that 35-year period to surpass $6,000 per annum. Along with its rapidly growing population and rising per capita GDP, Ethiopia's population is increasingly moving to urban areas. In 2015, only about 20% of Ethiopia's 108 million people lived in urban areas. This trend will accelerate through 2050. These pie charts, showing Ethiopia's total population and Ethiopians' urban population in blue, illustrate how, as Ethiopia's population nearly doubles by 2050, the portion of Ethiopia's population residing in urban areas will also double. With this urbanization will come expectations of access to safe water, with modern municipal water supplies and wastewater treatment. According to the IFS model, while water demand for industry will remain relatively low and steady, shown by the blue line, and water demand for agriculture will remain high, shown by the red line, municipal water demand will rise sharply by 2050 to support the 85 million Ethiopians living in urban areas by that time. This chart shows how Ethiopia's total water demand will nearly double from 10 cubic kilometers per year in 2015 to over 19 cubic kilometers by 2050. This increase stems mostly from those increases in municipal water demand. This bar chart shows the percentage of Ethiopia's population with access to safe, piped water. While only around 32% of Ethiopians had access in 2015, by 2050 the IFS model projects over 95% of Ethiopians will have access. Returning to the causal loop diagram, we can clearly see how Ethiopia's water demand will increase significantly, driven by growth in population, municipal population, GDP per capita, and rising standards of living leading to expectations of access to clean, safe water. What the future holds. Without changes to current trends, Ethiopia will require access to water supplies and need to manage its water usage wisely. The possibility of a humanitarian crisis rises if Ethiopia experiences unforeseen events such as drought or severe flooding that affect its water supplies. Thank you for watching this video. I use the following resources for the production of this video.